today we have Sam. Zaid is the CEO and co-founder of Getaround, the pioneering car sharing marketplace offering 100% digital experience powered by proprietary technology. With a background in engineering, Zaid boasts over 2 decades of experience in various tech sectors. Before founding Getaround, he established Aption, an enterprise software, and 360 Pi, a retail price intelligence platform acquired by Vista Equity. I'm going to say Sam. Sam, recognized as Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year for 2009 and Microsoft Code Award recipient, actively contributes to the tech community. You hold an engineering and physics degree from Queen's University, also an alumnus of the Singularity University, which I love. That's really cool. That's super exciting. The Singularity University's graduate studies program in artificial intelligence and robotics. Sam, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us here. All right.
Well, I mean, it's really an honor to be here. So thank you for having me.
Love it. All right. So you've had an awesome journey. I'm eager to dive into the experiences, insights gained throughout your entrepreneurial ventures. I'm going to concentrate a lot of our time on Getaround, but before Getaround, you founded a couple companies, so I don't want to pass them. So Aption was a big data AI company focused on developing a time of stream data mining framework. This was the pre-cloud era before Amazon Cloud, and you had to build your own big data stack and tooling. Looking back, I only have one question related to this, which is looking back at that journey, are there particular lessons, certain pitfalls that you've had that come to mind? Building Aption, it could be related to sales, it could be related to the team, it could be, acquiring talent. So many different ways for founders to to commit an error in any particular area and any particular stage of the company. Anything that comes to mind that you want to cover?
Yeah, so I'd probably say I think we made mistakes in all of those categories. I'm sure. It was a long time ago. It was a great, my first company was bootstrapped. We bootstrapped its profitability. I think bootstrapping was a great way to learn because you sort of had to do everything yourself and really understand. You couldn't just hire your way out of a problem. You had to sort of figure everything out from first principles, which is something that as a physicist, I've definitely a lesson I've taken through all of my startups is really to think from first principles about concepts, about product, about the business. So I think I learned a lot from that. Probably some universal truths along the way too, like first startups almost always take longer to build than you might expect. A smaller idea isn't necessarily much less work than a big idea. So, people sometimes think, oh, if I start small, it'll be easier. Yeah, maybe it's 20% easier, but it's not, 80% easier. And then you also have a lot of big ideas as a founder. You realize that, you got to keep things simple, simplify the product and the offering to make things scalable and more manageable. So there's a lot of mistakes I made with that company. Thankfully, we were successful, but those are probably some of the ones that just come to mind as general.
I love that. Those are really powerful ones. I love the amount of the energy is the same, whether you go in the, a company that's scalable and a company that's not as scalable. It's the same amount of energy put in. So I love that.
Totally.
I share that with a lot of founders as well. Was 360 Pi also bootstrapped? And I mean, with Aption, how many years? So it's like 5, 6, 7, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, the company is still around today. I mean, I transitioned out. I'm still on the board. I sold
some equity,
my equity and all that stuff. But my business partner, I was originally the CEO. He became the CEO. He still is today. Wow. But my involvement, was probably about 5 years.
5 years. And was 360 Pi, and 360 Pi It became a market leader. That's your next company after Aption. Became a market leader in retail price intelligence and product intelligence, using AI to optimize pricing and provide insights into competitors and demand signals. You successfully exited the company through an equity sale. Was 360 Pi, did that originate bootstrapped as well, or did you go a different route in that one?
Yeah, a little bit different because, so, we were doing AI back when AI wasn't cool. And actually, if you use the term AI, people thought you were nuts. But
I love that. People will laugh at you now if they weren't part of that before. They'll be like, what?
Yeah, if you didn't, it obviously it was very different too. It was pre-transformer era, and but you had to downplay it, otherwise, you just look like you were a lunatic. But back to your question on 360. So my first company was very deep in AI. We were building full stack, the hardware systems, the databases, the full infrastructure, as well as the hardware and software infrastructure, in order to then actually build the AI product, which was a lot more work. Around the time that cloud came out, we were pretty early on Amazon, EC2, and felt we could build something much more scalable there without sort of all of that infrastructure need. And so we actually incubated it inside of Aption, and then ultimately had a lot of seed funding from the company, from my first company. Then we raised our own, seed round, angel round, and then did a Series A.
That's as far as you took it with 360 Pi, Series A?
Yeah, we raised the Series. I think we might have raised the Series B, but we were profitable, so we didn't actually need to raise anymore. And
that's amazing.
We were at a junction. We actually got to a junction where I think the team was like, "Look, we either go raise more, and we have to invest a lot more, and we'll probably go back to not being profitable for a while as we." We had an existing product, was a market leader. We had a new product, was just on the cusp of scaling. We'd have to double down, triple down. And I think, at that point, I was actually no longer in the management team. I was on the board, actively helping out. But the team felt like, they wanted to explore a sale. We did, and we got, I can't remember, 4 or 5 term sheets in like 2 months. And so it was like a really fast process. And so they're like, we had a good option. They took it.
I love that. There, for founders wondering about the acquisition journey and how that even looks like, right? So you just mentioned, Sam, that when you decided my first question is, at what point did you actually start considering the sell the company, and why? And when you did start considering, what were the steps that took place afterwards?
Yeah. So look, I think I'll say that I was actually on the side of not selling the company. I actually felt like we had a pretty cool product. The e-commerce and the category, and was just a burgeoning category, and there was a lot of longevity to the opportunity. But we were at a juncture where I think that some of the management team felt one thing, some of the team felt another way. We all discussed it, and we said, okay, look, let's explore it. So what does explore mean? To answer your question, we said, okay, well, we engaged an investment bank. We talked to a number of our larger customers, let them know that we were, we'd had some interest and we were exploring a potential sale. And then things like snowballed really quickly. And so we got to a place where we had to make a decision to go or no go. I think this was like, maybe we're chatting about it in November, December, and we had like, exploding term sheets in February. And so, we ultimately talked about it, felt it was a good opportunity. And so we chose to do the sale. Ultimately, I think you had to have everybody, for us not to do the sale, everybody had to want to go really long on the management team, and it just wasn't universal. It's one of those ones where I think if everyone was saying we're just going to go, all the way, then we would have done it. But that wasn't the case.
Yeah, this reminds me that in business school, this is like, I don't know, 14 years ago, it gets farther and farther away, business school.
In 1925.
It was in black and white, weird enough. One of the professors, when they asked, somebody's like, when do you decide to sell, right? And I liked his answer, and you can tell me, what you think, but his answer goes, when they offer you money that in your mind you can't imagine being able to generate over the next like 6 years or whatever it is, and it's obviously a very simplistic answer, but that's an interesting one that I always stuck with me. It's like, so I don't know. Well, any thought on that, Sam?
Well, I think it's a fair concept. I mean, if you've got, there's sort of like whatever that threshold is. I think it's a little bit different for everybody. Like life-changing wealth, right? And so, I think that just depends on your conviction. I think as a team, as a founder, and your craziness level as to how far you want to go, right?
Exactly.
I think you can take some chips off the table, and then keep going. I mean, I think I'm actually a big believer in incrementally doing secondaries through different funding rounds, because it takes off some of that sort of like super binary pressure that might lead people to do a short-term optimization versus something thinking more longer term.
I love that. Can you Sam, for founders that haven't heard that before, like secondaries, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, it just means as you're raising, whatever, Series B, Series C, Series D, some of the equity you raise goes to, buying stock and equity from the team, so that you take some chips off the table. You're not selling you're only selling 5, 10, 15% of your position, but at least you've then locked in some gains. It's like, if you invest in a stock and it goes crazy and you're like, well, do I just keep riding it all the way, or do I sell a little bit just to feel like I've
take a little bit off the table so that at least I'm secure in a certain portion of it? Yeah, that's
right. It allows you to think more objectively, right? I think versus like, you get to this juncture where you're like, maybe the pressure is too much and you just need to like do something like sell the company because that's a short term. You're optimizing for sort of the near term, short term.
I've heard this from a couple of our special guests that have taken their companies public, and also have sold a couple of their companies as well. And they mentioned that it's the investment banker, the who you choose to help you along this journey makes a big difference, and in a number of different factors. One of them I heard was it actually allows you to play the good cop, bad cop scenario, where he said like the bankers would be the ones asking for more and this and this and this, and it would allow him to maintain the good cop relationship with the company that's looking to acquire them, saying like, look, they're asking for this, like, I don't know, right? So I'm curious, is that a thing that actually, was that an experience you had, or was it very different journey for you?
Yeah, I've had that experience. I think it's helpful to have, it's helpful to have a banker that you really like, that you can have really honest, authentic conversation with, that is like on your team, because then you can sort of set up whatever dynamic makes sense. That may be the right dynamic where they play a bit more of the heavy, and so you don't have to. And of course, there's always the opportunity, if they're doing it and they maybe push too far and someone gets really pissed off, you can be like, oh no, I told them that was the wrong thing to do. I walked it back. And then of course you look a little bit more like the hero. And ultimately, look, it's not that you need to look at the hero, but obviously since you're going along with the deal, there needs to be a good relationship there, right? So
exactly. And any other pitfalls that come to mind within that process of a merger or an acquisition? Anything that you say, if next time, for any founder that's going through this, maybe you should ask yourself the following question, or anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think for a lot of founders, your identity can be tied into your company, right? You sort of define who you are by, it gets mixed up with the company you founded, and
Yep.
people know you for that. You know yourself for that. Obviously, when you then decide to sell the company, you got to be prepared for change, and certainly that part is going to change. It's not always bad, but you know,
Psychologically.
yeah, psychologically, it's you might not be able to hold on to that part of your identity the same way anymore. And so for the founder, that can be harder to process. Obviously, the cultural change, it's not always going to be the same once you're part of a bigger company, and you always feel like you're the scrappy startup fighting the good fight. So I think being prepared for change and understanding what it means to you, and how you identify yourself, I think is things people don't always think about when you're in the hustle and bustle of negotiating term sheets and
when you're in survival
cents
mode, right? That's great. That's an awesome aspect I had not heard of. That's a really great one. So let's dive into Getaround. You started Getaround in 2011, and what did Getaround set out to do back then? Does it continue with the same mission today? And if you can just highlight, like, what is the problem, and who are you solving that problem for?
Yeah, for sure.
For those that didn't live
we
in San Francisco in the
Early
early
on.
days.
in the heyday, yeah. When everyone was a Getaround customer. So look, we launched in 2011. Our mission was to empower people to car share everywhere. Why? Simply because we have too many cars, right? They pollute our environment. We use them like 4 or 5% of each day. They congest cities. So for us, it felt like it made both economical and environmental sense for people to share cars. That was the mission. That remains the mission. Is really to bring about that disruption of personal car ownership. And back when we started the company, you got to sort of, this is going to sound weird to anyone now, but like the iPhone was a new thing, right? So like we figured that we could build some cool like in-car IoT tech and help transform your car into sort of the ultimate iPhone accessory, and then use that to create like a much more fully digital experience of sharing cars, where you wouldn't have to meet the other party or pick up a car key or manually coordinate things. And so really create a seamless experience where effectively your phone could become like your car key, and renting someone else's car would be as easy as like, taking a fob out of your pocket and unlocking the doors to your own car on your own driveway. That was sort of the vision and mission we wanted to do.
And back then, that's a great point about the smartphone. Back then, what did it look like? If you wanted to rent a car, I guess it's what most people would assume.
Yeah, I would say that most people would describe that experience as pretty broken, super frustrating. You'd go online, you'd rent a car at some place like an enterprise location or Avis location. You'd show up. Hopefully they'd have a car. You don't know exactly what car you're going to get. It's like you scratch the pad, you get this car. It's just like, oh crap, that's not the car I wanted. And then you wait in line.
We have a truck and we have a buggy. Which one do you want? And you're like, oh, can you just have like a normal sedan, please?
Yeah, just like, yeah, exactly. And then you get the paperwork, initial here, sign, whatever. Then, do you want to buy this? Do you want this insurance protection or this whatever tolling package?
And everything was physical. Like you had to go to the place, right? Like
go to the place, you fill
to even understand what was available, what is happening. Like it was so archaic.
Yeah, I mean, it's still pretty archaic, less archaic, but still pretty archaic in the traditional sort of car rental model. And
that's true. And
then, you can only book a day at a time. You needed to like provide more notice. Anyway, it's just like it was just a very, very, broken experience in a world of digital, right? And connected. And so we just wanted to make it something that was just download the app, book a car, be gone in 60 seconds.
At this time, were there already other players? Like, was this a booming moment for marketplace, ride sharing, all that stuff, or what did that look
like?
Early,
pretty nascent. I mean, Airbnb was really early on. Uber was really early on. I think Uber was still doing limos back then only, right?
Wow.
So it was black limos. I remember one of our investors had like, literally bought a limo because he was like running it on Uber.
That's hilarious.
And
someone saying that's too niche, you'll never go anywhere.
Right, exactly. Yeah. People saying there's no, the TAM was small and this and that. And I actually had an investor call me about the TAM for car sharing, the TAM for ride sharing. They're thinking investing in the space, and they're like, yeah, we just think it's a really small market and all of the stuff. So real story.
That's always a fun one.
Yeah, that is super fun. Because it becomes so, for anyone else now, it's so normal. They're like, what? No, of course. Why? It's a no-brainer. You're like, no, it wasn't a no-brainer. People thought I was crazy when we were saying this stuff, Wait, so you raised for Getaround, or like, did you raise some capital, some venture funding, and what was like your go-to-market? What was the first thing that allowed you to actually test out how this thing could work?
We raised basically a seed round, angel round. I think the time was a really big round for a seed round. It was a $3.5 million. Today, today people are like, oh yeah, it's just like,
that's pre-seed.
lower quartile.
Pre-seed.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
But it was like, it was a lot at the time. And then we had to build the experience, the product. One of the big things we were obviously had to solve was getting insurance, so someone could actually drive a car legally when they rented it.
Right.
There's some stories around all of that. And the way we ended up, once we solved all of that, the way we got the first customers, it was a lot of guerrilla techniques. We convinced one of our investors who was thinking about buying a Tesla Roadster, the old, before the Model X,
the original one.
Yeah, the original one. To basically, we got them to, put it on Getaround, and we did a bunch of like our own press to, basically say we had the world's first hourly rentable Tesla, and if you wanted to drive a Tesla, you could come to Getaround and rent it for a few hours, and that went viral, and
and that really is keeping the supply side really low when there's one Tesla for you to
we had one. We did all the pressure on one Tesla, but then other people were like, "Oh, I can make that much money." So then we ended up. Initially, I think we had. I remember it was one of my a CEO at 360p. I was talking to him, and he's like, it was really early, and he's like, "So you guys just gonna be a marketplace for renting out Tesla Roadsters?" Because I think all of the first inventory was just Tesla Roadsters, which are not the most rentable cars, I'll tell you.
That's funny.
That's what got me. That's what got me, like the number of cool cars. First of all, we didn't have cars because we lived in New York City for like 20 years, my wife, and 15 years, and then like 5 years in San Francisco, whatever. And so it's seeing the cars that you had on the platform that you're like, not only you could do this, but also they were really cool cars.
The access.
You have a whole range of cars that you would never see even on a typical rental platform. I remember we just had our first dog, a little Chihuahua, 7-pound Chihuahua. Literally, we had 1 week with Chihuahua, and we rented a Porsche convertible because we could through Getaround.
Wow, that's awesome.
We took it to Napa, and we just forgot to think that the dog might not enjoy a convertible Porsche at the age of 1. So it was the most miserable experience we had. Not with the car. The car was awesome.
This is Gracie?
This is Gracie. Yeah, little 7-pound Chihuahua.
It turns out she's has a phobia for cars.
Yeah, scar phobia, especially
that's probably where the phobia came from. Exactly.
Yeah. But we loved it. Yeah, no, that was awesome.
Oh, that's funny. I think I remember that. That's really cool. That was with Getaround.
You also get to try cars that that were beautiful, like Infinities. I became a fan because I never drove, and then I found one that ran around the corner. It was beautiful, and it's just like, oh, I get it now. So that was interesting about rental services have that option. Obviously, like they have that contracts and partnerships. Do you have those type of? Did you get well, I guess not because it's the customer, but is there anything there because I was able to learn of new cars and new brands through Getaround, and I became a fan of certain cars.
So related to partnerships, like, was that a thing?
Yeah, is there anything there? Was there anything there? Did you guys explore?
No. I mean, we did a lot of that early on, where it was like, on Getaround, you might drive a Porsche for the first time or a Volkswagen for the first time, and you're like, oh, you know what? I really like this car. It's cool. It's got these you build an affinity for the brand. And so we did a number of promotional partnerships early on, but what we realized was it was just hard earlier because we just didn't have the footprint and the scale to then take those partnerships, to some bigger level, because we just weren't big enough. I mean, like, we could do San Francisco, maybe a few other cities we were in.
That makes sense.
To really, to really try and take that to the next level, we just needed more mass and more time to build the marketplace. But it was, I mean, I also developed, a liking for different brands and different cars I'd never driven before because of GETR.
Were there, so the initial strategy of bringing in that Tesla and building that want and distinguishing yourself from anything else that was available and out there. So that was something that really got it going. How did you go about, for everyone that came in and used it, how did you figure out how to maintain that user experience, or how do you keep those people from coming back? Were there certain things, certain strategies, certain things that allowed you to just make them want to always come back?
I mean, early on, you mean?
Yeah, early on. And you can also evolve if this brings you back to even now, whichever one you want to go with.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, early on, we did a lot of stuff that was definitely probably not scalable. It was like very hands-on, high touch, but we felt it was important because we were just trying to build that seed, planting the seed. We have to water the soil quite a lot to just get it to grow. And so, initially when someone signed up and they were, looking for a car, they tried to book a car. If their booking didn't go through, because, we only had so much liquidity in the early days, we'd actually call them up and help them try to figure out how to get another one. And, we'd go so far as to call the owner of the car and say, hey, this person's about to book your car.
Wow.
To make sure you're going to accept it. And, we just manual matchmaking for a while just to try to drive both sides of the marketplace. And then we'd follow up with every user. I think my co-founder, Jessica, did a lot of this on the marketing side, and the first 1,000 users, she knew every single one of them by name.
Wow.
And so
that's amazing.
It was, we just did sort of whatever it would take. I mean, we also acquired customers in really non-scalable ways. Like most people really,
what was it, like pamphlets outside? What were non-scalable ways?
Yeah, I mean, we did every scrappy thing we could think of that was not going to cost much money because we didn't have much money. So, we talked about some of the press and media stuff around the Tesla,
right,
a lot in online communities. And yeah, we would stand outside in San Francisco, outside the BART exit ramps, during rush hour. And so people are funneling out, everyone's coming out of the subway, super packed. And we'd just be rapid fire flyering people. And we have a competition on who could hand out the flyers the fastest, because there'd be two of us for each exit. Just being we even did stuff where we'd sneak into larger apartment complexes, 3 or 4 of us. We'd divide out the floors and would each run the floor, sliding pamphlets under people's doors, basically as fast as we could before security would kick us out. Usually, security was one person, so they'd catch one of us, and that person might do 2 or 3 floors. They catch the next person. They've done 4 or 5 floors. And by the time they got the 4th person, you'd have gotten
you
10
did everything.
Of things. So,
sacrifice yourself for the group.
yeah.
I love that.
I mean, they'd be like, "What are you guys doing?" We're told them, and sometimes they'd be like, "Oh, it's pretty cool," So
yeah,
we're a little,
I love that. When did you know that there was something very special happening? Was there a product market fit sort of moment along the journey that you're like, okay, this is really cooking. Now we got to think about this and this and this. And so when was it? And were there any particular signs? And then after those signs, what were the new challenges or questions that you had to ask yourself to try and solve for that growth?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I mean, I think one of the things was, the initial concept. When people got it, they really resonated with the idea. And so we felt like that was a good sign, obviously, if we could execute the idea. I think the other one was when we really got our IoT, what we call Getaround Connect, our IoT hardware. We gone through several, like
renditions of it. Yeah.
Yeah, versions of the hardware. We'd started out with trying to be less sophisticated and piggybacking off more functionality from the phone to building a lot of stuff directly on device. But I think by the time we're in our second or third generation, and we had that in, scalably deployed in like San Francisco, and we could see people just really like engaging at much higher frequency and renting cars, all the time for short trips, long trips, all sorts of stuff. I think that's when we really felt like, oh wow, this like, some of these people are like super frequent high users, and we just need to get more of that into more places. And then it was like, okay, how do we scale this and figure out, the thing about renting out cars is some people are great drivers and some people are terrible drivers. And so
in hindsight, because everything in hindsight looks so much
easier,
black and white. Everything is black and white. You're like, of course. But in hindsight, as you're going through that growth, were there things that any particular advice or lessons from that particular period during the growth, anything that you say, oh man, I wish, I think it would have been great if we did this, or maybe dedicated more time to this, or I don't know, anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, it's a good question.
And there's like a personal
I think
side to this, and like, and the strategic company thing to it. And that question goes for both, right? Like if, like, but the personal, I mean, like the human side of things, of as the emotions that are happening, the things that are about to happen for founders that haven't had that product market fit yet. Like, what should they be prepared for emotionally? And then also in the company side of things, like, what does that mean? What are some of the biggest challenges that come in, and how do you figure out how to prioritize? Like, because so many things are happening so fast, so quickly every day, and that's, it can drive anyone crazy, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like different. I'm just trying to reflect and say, I think the first thing is, like, once you're there and you're looking at growth, I think people always like celebrate, oh, raised a ton of money, raised more money, raised more money. And look, it's hard to do, so it's worth celebrating. It also increases the pressure on the business for sure, right? And pressure to grow, pressure to execute. And I think that transition can be challenging, because part of what's great about an early stage startup is you get to explore a bunch of things, this work, try this, try that, blah, blah, blah. It's super dynamic. It's like you're striving in super high ambiguity, and a lot of founders really enjoy that. And then, okay, fine, you get down one trajectory, you've got product market fit, and now you're going into like growth and scaling mode. You sort of have to become more disciplined, willingly say no to more things. And I'm saying this as though I've done it perfectly. I have definitely not, and learned things along the way, but like, and be ready to sort of like, because you'll have choices, and those choices, hopefully, you're going to make probably a lot of mistakes, but you're just trying to minimize the number of mistakes you make, and the wrong decisions you make, and try to get more right ones. And so the question becomes like, how do you set yourself up to, to do that and do it well, or do it better than, and it's just different. It's just different than when you're earlier stage and you're exploring and trying to find product market fit.
How did you, even in the team side of things, right? Because you raise, and what you mentioned, when you raise and you raise at a certain valuation, now time is ticking. Now you have even bigger numbers to be able to reach, to make all of this make sense. And then that means hiring more talent. And then if you're hiring more talent, how many and in where do you allocate this talent? Like where, so like maybe even on the talent side, in your experience, were there things that you did that looking back, you say like, maybe I would have done that?
Definitely things I would have done differently. I think for Getaround, for example, we were like, for a long time, and maybe for too long, we were founder-led like founder managed in the sense of, I don't mean the founder thing was wrong. It's just that, you know, the three, myself, my two co-founders, sort of like, we were the executive team. We just did everything and we'd work with, but it wasn't like, you know, we had built a super senior executive team below us, and then we tried to do it. And then we tried to do it really fast, and you know, because it's like you raise a bunch of money, then you raise a lot of money, and then you're like, okay, now we need to be more scalable. So you start trying to like, you know, do scalable things and set up the org differently. And I think in hindsight, I probably would have tried to do that earlier and more gradually, because it's so hard to get done correctly, and to get you know, to build up your key lieutenants in a way that everything is just, you know, humming, and you're able to then really scale the organization below that. I think we, you know, it was a lot of times where like for a while, I'd say everyone would just come to me for everything. I was like, you know, like processing like, you know,
so the delegating of things and
so
surrounding
a little bit of
yourself
delegation and building and getting those people in early so you have time to gel as a team, maybe sooner than you might otherwise think, to do it, and to do it more gradually versus to do it as fast as we had to. That definitely caused some challenges, I think.
I had another guest mention about when you're scaling. He said, do all your OKRs and like your KPI, everything at a 6-month span and nothing greater. Because he's like, past 6 months, it could be way too much. Then like there are many other variables and many other things, and below that is too short. Or is there, as you hear that, are there things that come to mind, or what
I think similar. I mean, the way we've already done it and the way I like to do it is do OKR, like, you know, annual OKR, so 12-month horizon, and then do quarterlies that line up to those. And you're right, like, it's probably the case that by like Q3, Q4, the alignment to your annuals may not be as strong as it was at the start of the year. Definitely quarterly OKRs, I wouldn't do shorter or longer personally. But you know, with the overlay of the annuals, I think that helps drive alignment a lot. The other thing is like product roadmaps. We tend to do like, okay, I really want to know what we're doing over the next 3 sprints, so like the next 6 weeks, in a lot more detail, and then have sort of like the roadmap out for 2 or 3 quarters. And then beyond that, sure, there's a lot of things we want to work on, but it's sort of like those different levels of granularity.
I love it. Richie, you wanna?
Thank you. I have a question that, you know, Alejandro and I, we love our tribe, our founders, CEOs, etc. And you have a lot of experience in that role. And one of my favorite questions, I don't know if you remember seeing kind of the Elon Musk bulletproof glass fiasco. And it's the bowl,
and it's not supposed to break the glass from the.
You got it. It's a great example where, you know, inside organizations, information doesn't really go up fast enough, so sometimes not at all, and ends up leaving, you know, the CEO out there hanging. Have you had, and God knows I've had many of those that I wish I got information internally faster to me and not 6 months later. Have there been any of these that come to mind with Getaround? And like, what's your perspective about, you know, how to work with, you know, a large organization, because now you have a big organization, and preventing people, because people normally do not like to rely problems upwardly. What are your thoughts on that? And like, how do you, you know, your experience on that? Any lessons learned?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been caught by that in the past. You know, we had you know, I think I'm just thinking back, like back in like 2018, 2019, we had switched to a partner related to what we do on insurance, and there'd been some challenges, and you know, I didn't really hear about it until, you know, much later than when the teams were starting to figure it out and work on it, and it just didn't make it to my desk until later. And you know, and obviously in hindsight, I'm like, geez, why don't you guys just tell me sooner so that we could all just like collectively brainstorm how to solve this and tackle it. And that was really, you know, it was devastating on many fronts to find that out later, versus sooner. And what I learned from that was, I guess a couple of things, like somewhat related to the org stuff, like some people are really good at managing, a dozen or 2 dozen people. I'm not really like that. For my style, I'd rather have, a small group of 5 to 7 people that report to me that I can really build more like a deeper, more authentic relationship with, and, just make sure that there's very high organizational trust for people to tell me good news and bad news, and that, I'm not going to overreact in a way that people are afraid to come to me with the stuff they don't want to tell me. Which I think in the past, certainly when I was younger, a hot-headed founder, I might have made it scary for people to approach me, not intentionally, but so just being actively aware of the fact that, like, you got to make it easy, because it's necessarily hard. So if you make it harder, that's counterproductive. And then just, basic organizational design philosophies, like, you want to look at span of control. You want to try and foster a culture where you have fewer layers between you and whatever the sort of like bottom layer of the org is. And so you got to put some real design principles in around the organization, and because otherwise, as you scale and you hire more people from big companies, they sort of like apply the patterns of big companies to your startup, which are probably not the patterns you want at all, right? They're really bad big company habits, and they just creep in sort of organically. So unless you actively have like a philosophy people can sort of think about, absent some sort of other framework, they'll default to the framework they know. So unless you just only hire startup people, you'll probably get sort of like maybe some antiquated or some bureaucratic sort of like frameworks seeping into the mix.
Sam, has there been, and by the way, this is my last question, because I want to give some time. Also, anything, the other question after this one is like anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure that we share, and we share that with the community. But before that question, I wanted to ask you, have you, what was that first question? Now I'm trying to remember my first question. Well, let's jump to the second question, the last one, which is like, do you have anything that you want to make sure that we cover here that we didn't get to cover?
Good question. No, I mean, I honestly, I came on here just really trying to be helpful and figuring, we'll just figure it out as we go. I guess I know we started at the top of the call with like, your focus on community. I've had the good fortune of accidentally starting a community, around the time of my first company called Fresh Founders, which was, we didn't do intentionally,
I saw that,
but it organically became a pretty cool group, still exists today. So my advice would be to a lot of entrepreneurs is to try and find your people. Maybe not all entrepreneurs are what you describe as your person or type of people,
right?
But if you can get a good group of like-minded people around you, that are smart, that can push you to learn new things, that you respect, it really is a bit of a birds of a feather effect, right? You grow, they grow, it helps everyone win together. I know one of the things we did in Fresh Founders early on, it was a small group of founders. Myself and another gentleman by the name of Aiden Mirzai, who started a company called Fellow. Super great. He sold his company, the previous company, to SurveyMonkey. Toby, who founded Shopify. A lot of great people in there. Luke, who's now the chief growth officer there, who's founded TravelPod, who was acquired by TripAdvisor. And we did this thing where, like, we didn't know what the hell we were doing, so we'd like all bring problems together, being like, "Hey, I'm suffering with this problem inside my company. Maybe you guys have solved this before." And it was like, to do that took a lot of trust and vulnerability, and
right, 100%.
Versus like a lot of the networking groups you go to where everyone is like, "I'm crushing it, I'm crushing it."
Everyone's a rock star.
I know.
If you look at LinkedIn,
for sure
everyone is crushing it.
Yeah. So like, if you can find that, I think it can be really, really cool, really great, and really accelerate, your learning and your journey. But
are you still active with the group, Sam, or?
I'm in and out. I mean, I'm not as active because they were based up in Canada, and obviously I'm not there. But one of my another good friend of mine, Solon, who's really passionate about it, has been really driving it forward. And so I'm supposed to go give a talk there sometime soon. I don't know when it'll be, but hopefully it'll be sometime next time I cross the border.
I wanna thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. That's like the one valuable thing, the most valuable thing everyone has is their time, and you shared yours with us. We appreciate you and thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me, guys. It was a great conversation. Really cool, really authentic, super fun. So glad to be part of the community and look forward to staying in touch.
Pleasure
Awesome,
meeting
man.
you, Sam.
Right.
Un
See you guys.
abrazo.
Adios.
Big hug.
Adios.